What happens when nature's harshest law of survival bends under the weight of misplaced maternal instinct? And what would a lone matron do when he witnesses the impossible in a place where no one else is watching? Where are you watching from? Comment your city or country below, and let's begin. And if you're watching this on your TV, just grab your remote and hit subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next powerful story waiting here for you. Montana's Rockies. Late spring, dawn filtering through the mist. Out here, a man can vanish into the silence, and the world would never know. Liam had driven 2 days and hiked another, carrying his hopes and lenses deep into a land that belonged more to memory than to men. Every twig crackled underfoot like a warning. You don't belong here. He was chasing a dream, not just a photograph, something wild and honest. The forest here didn't simply breathe. It watched, it whispered, and it remembered. He set up camp alone, a speck in an ocean of pines and granite. No phone signal, no rescue. Only the slow hush of wind and the sharp scent of wet earth. As Liam cleaned his camera glass, he thought of the line between witness and intruder. He'd always sworn never to interfere, to let life and death play out as they must. But nothing, no book, no law, no warning from any mentor, could prepare him for what the Rockies were about to reveal. This was the day Liam's world would shift, forever marked by something no lens could fully capture. By the time Liam reached the silent zone, exhaustion was a kind of background hum, woven into every muscle. He'd spent a night on the mountain's spine, sleeping beneath the tangled limbs of a wind-stunted pine. Dawn's first rays slipped through the trees, painting the brush in pale gold. A chill still clung to the air, but Liam didn't shiver. He was too focused, every sense tuned to the rhythm of the wild. He picked his way through waist-high grass and rough ground, each step measured, deliberate. Here, the land was a living museum of scars, scratches from a bear's claws on a dead trunk, tufts of fur snagged on the fence of thorns, a fresh print pressed into the damp soil. To most people, this would be emptiness. But to Liam, it was a tapestry, a language older than words. He set up just beyond a natural clearing, where fallen branches formed a kind of blind. Every piece of gear was arranged with ritual precision. Camera body, 3 lenses, spare batteries, a battered field notebook, a thermos of strong black coffee. Once he was settled, the outside world faded to static. Here time warped, minutes stretched thin, and then snapped back with the sound of a distant bird or a startled rustle in the grass. Liam's pulse slowed. He became, for a little while, less a man and more a shadow, an observer, not an actor. Out here, patience was the only currency that mattered. It was late morning when the bobcat mother appeared, almost as if conjured by his longing. She moved with a caution born of a lifetime spent on the wrong side of danger, each paw placed in silence. Her fur, dusky and flecked with pale gold, rippled with hidden power. Following her, like tumbleweeds in a gentle wind, came her 3 kittens. He saw them through his telephoto lens. The first 2, bold and bright-eyed, darted around her feet, playing at being predators. The third, the smallest, was another story entirely. He stumbled more than he walked, paws too big for his frame. When his siblings leaped over a fallen branch, he paused, sniffed, and tried to scramble over, only to tumble down in a heap of awkward limbs. Liam bit back a laugh, careful not to startle them. In the hush of the wilderness, Even the smallest sound could carry like a gunshot. But he felt something loosen in his chest, something old and quiet, a kind of tenderness he hadn't known he still possessed. The mother nuzzled the runt with a patience that felt almost saintly, pushing him forward gently with her nose. She was a study in contrasts, eyes hard as riverstone, movements as soft as moss. He scribbled notes in the margins of his notebook, the words tumbling out before he could filter them. Runt, curious, clumsy, relentless, always chasing, always left behind, personality more than subject. The other two kittens wrestled, tangled up in a blur of fur and teeth. The runt watched them, then mimicked their crouch, tail flicking with concentration. He pounced and missed the target by a mile, rolling headfirst into the grass. His mother flicked an ear in what looked suspiciously like exasperation, but didn't intervene. Some lessons, even for bobcats, had to be learned the hard way. The longer Liam watched, the more he forgot about the project, the deadlines, the world he'd left behind. These animals were no longer anonymous data points or just faces in his portfolio. They were individuals, with wants and fears and personalities as vivid as anyone he'd met in the city. But even in this moment of near peace, tension pulsed beneath the surface. The mother bobcat froze, ears flattened, every muscle coiled. Liam's lens followed her gaze up, way up, into the empty blue. A shadow circled on the wind, vast and silent. He held his breath. Out here, a single shape in the sky could change everything. For a brief, beautiful minute, the bobcat family huddled close, a living portrait of wild hope and wild risk. Liam's camera clicked, almost on its own. He felt a responsibility so heavy it pressed against his ribs, not just to capture what he saw, but to bear witness to a world that could vanish with a single mistake. He glanced at the runt, now sitting a few steps apart, staring at a butterfly that danced in a shaft of light. He looked utterly oblivious to the danger above. In that instant, Liam understood the story was no longer his to control. Out here, the wild would write its own script, and whatever happened next, he would have to watch, powerless. The land held its breath with him, every leaf and feather on edge, and far above the shadow wheeled, waiting for its moment. The Rockies know how to keep a secret. Up here, the sky itself is another world, a wide blue cathedral where only the boldest dare to climb. Liam watched through his lens as the shadow made its slow, deliberate spiral, just a shape at first, so high it could have been mistaken for a trick of the light. But every creature below seemed to sense it. Birds scattered, a chipmunk froze mid-step, and the bobcat mother pressed herself low to the earth, tail flicking with alarm. It was a bald eagle, magnificent and merciless. Its white head glinted in the morning sun, sharp as a blade. Liam's heart hammered, not just as a photographer, but as a man who knew what was coming. He'd dreamed of capturing an eagle hunt in the wild, but the reality was nothing like the stories. In this moment, he was both witness and unwilling accomplice. The eagle hung in the air, reading the world below with eyes colder than mountain ice. The mother bobcat hissed, shoving her kittens closer to a log, body coiled, ready to defend, but hopelessly outmatched. The two larger kittens obeyed, crawling into the brush. The runt, as always, hesitated, distracted by a moth, a daydream, or maybe just a stubborn streak too strong for his own good. It happened in a heartbeat. The eagle folded its wings, becoming a missile. Liam barely tracked the motion, the rush of air, the blur of brown and white, the violence of gravity made manifest. Claws flashed, impossibly quick. The runt vanished in a tangle of fur and feathers, a silent gasp lost to the wind. The mother bobcat lunged, desperate. Her cry shattered the silence, raw and helpless. She swiped at empty air, then chased a few wild steps, but the eagle had already lifted, heavy with its prize, wings laboring upward. For a long moment, she stood frozen, tail slashing in panic, eyes locked on the shrinking shadow above. Liam's hands trembled. His camera clicked, capturing a dozen images he never wanted to remember. For all his resolve to remain objective, he felt a hollow dread settle inside him, a cold place where curiosity and empathy collided, leaving only guilt. The eagle's flight was purposeful, angling toward the far side of a ridge where a sheer cliff cut the sky in two. Liam's mind spun, torn between instinct and reason. He'd promised himself again and again, never intervene, never break the contract with the wild. Yet as he watched the mother bobcat prowl in confusion, searching for a kitten that was already lost to her, that line blurred. He thought of all the hours he'd spent in this country, learning its tracks, its rules, its silences. The law of nature was clear. The eagle had as much right to hunt as the bobcat had to mother. But Liam couldn't silence the stubborn voice in his chest that whispered, "You can't just watch this happen." Almost before he realized it, his hands were moving, snapping the lens cap on, stuffing his camera and only the essentials into his pack. Water, map, a battered climbing harness he'd nearly left at home. He moved quickly, quietly, trying not to startle the mother bobcat, though she was beyond noticing him now, nose to the ground, circling and circling, a soundless question in her golden eyes. He broke his own cardinal rule. He followed the eagle's flight path, pushing through brambles, the land growing steeper with every step. His mind raced with calculations, the direction, the height of the ridge, the distance he could travel before exhaustion or darkness caught him. Somewhere up above, a kitten mewed, too faint for human ears, but in his imagination it rang clear and desperate. The mountains, the trees, even the clouds seemed to watch him go, as if judging a trespass he had no words to defend. As Liam moved deeper into the wild, one question beat in his mind with every hurried step. What would you do if no one was watching? By the time he reached the base of the cliff, he was breathless, scratched, and soaked in sweat. The eagle was already a distant speck, circling its eyrie high above, a fortress in stone, unreachable to all but the bravest or the most desperate. Liam set his jaw. He had come here for the story of a lifetime. Now he realized he was living it, and the script had been torn to shreds by the wind. Liam pressed deeper into the wild, adrenaline sharpening every sense. He traced the eagle's flight by instinct and the clues left behind. A drifting feather caught in a thorn bush, the sudden hush of the forest as smaller creatures recognized a predator had passed. The land here was changing. The trees thinned, giving way to boulders and sharp drops. The sun burned hot on his back, sweat trickling beneath his shirt. But he hardly noticed. Every step carried risk. The ground was uneven, treacherous with loose stones and tangled roots. Liam moved fast, but not reckless. He'd spent years in country like this, learning to read the subtle signs, to respect the hidden dangers. A slip here could mean a broken ankle, or worse, an end to the chase before it began. But the image of the kitten, limp in the eagle's talons, spurred him forward. He found himself whispering encouragement, half to himself, half to the wild. Hold on. Please hold on. When the land opened at last, he stopped at the foot of a massive cliff. It rose before him, sheer and forbidding, a scar of pale stone gouged out of the mountain. Far above, the eagle's nest was visible, a bulky tangle of sticks perched on a narrow ledge. He squinted, searching for movement, and after a long moment, a flicker of tawny fur confirmed what he feared. The bobcat kitten was alive, at least for now. A faint mew drifted down, barely more than a rumor on the wind. Liam felt it more than heard it, a thread of sound that pulled at something ancient inside him. The cliff was not a smooth wall, but a mess of jagged edges, wet with spring runoff and slick with moss. It might be climbable, with luck and skill and more nerve than sense. But it was also deadly. One wrong move and he'd be just another secret swallowed by the mountains. He set down his pack and scanned the face for possible routes. Every handhold, every ledge, every patch of unstable scree was a puzzle. For a long moment, he weighed the odds, measuring risk against responsibility. His camera, heavy in its case, felt useless now. This was a test no lens could capture, only memory. Liam sat back on his heels, frustration pressing at his chest. He checked his phone out of habit, even though he knew there'd be no signal here. The world had narrowed to this patch of earth, this impossible vertical reach. There was no one to call, no rescue to summon. Even if he could get through, what would he say? There's a bobcat kitten in an eagle's nest. You have to believe me. He laughed, the sound brittle and strange. Out here, reality bent and twisted in the thin mountain air. He realized with a jolt that no one else would see what he was seeing. No one would know if he failed, or even if he vanished. He was as invisible as a shadow on the rocks. He pulled out his camera, not for documentation now, but as a way to steady himself, to do what he'd always done, observe. Through the long lens, the world above came into focus. The eagle was there, standing guard on the edge of the nest. The kitten, a scrap of fur barely moving, curled into itself for warmth. Somewhere inside the tangle of sticks, a second shape moved. The eagle's own chick, restless, hungry. Liam's thoughts circled, restless as the birds above. Was it fate or just random cruelty that led the eagle to steal this kitten? Would anyone ever believe him if he told the story? More pressingly, was it even his place to try and change the outcome? He let the camera fall to his lap, rubbing the grit from his eyes. Out here, with no rules and no witnesses, all that remained was his own conscience. Was it enough? He watched as the sky darkened, clouds building over the distant peaks. The air shifted, an early warning of weather, or maybe just the breath of something bigger, something ancient. The world felt immense, indifferent. Yet Liam could not look away. He spoke, barely a whisper, his words carried off by the wind. Who would believe me? Call who with no signal out here? Even if I could. What would I say? No. This is mine alone to face. The mountains listened in silence. Above, the eagle stood sentinel. The bobcat kitten trembled, lost between two worlds, and Liam, in that moment, understood what it meant to be truly alone in the wild. An observer and a witness, powerless, but unable to walk away. Afternoon shadows crept slowly across the face of the cliff as Liam remained rooted to the ground below, knees pressed into the cold earth. He barely moved, afraid that even the smallest shift might break the spell, or worse, tip the balance between life and death in the nest high above. Binoculars in hand, breath held tight, he watched the drama unfold on a stage of stone and sky. The nest, built from ancient branches and scavenged wire, looked impossibly fragile from this angle. Yet it had survived storms and snow and the weight of hungry chicks. Liam's fingers trembled as he adjusted the focus. The mother eagle loomed over the mess of feathers and fur, head cocked with eerie intelligence. The eaglet peered from behind her wing, small and scrappy, its world limited to the rim of sticks and its mother's shadow. But Liam's eyes kept drifting back to the bobcat kitten. Runt. The little body, curled as small as it could go, seemed out of place among talons and beaks. Runt's sides fluttered with shallow breaths. From so far below, it was impossible to tell if the kitten was sleeping or simply too weak to move. Liam expected the worst. He'd read enough field notes, watched enough documentaries to know the brutal logic of hunger. The eagle should have killed Runt, feeding its own chick with fresh meat. But what he saw was stranger. A hesitation, a rewriting of the script. The mother eagle nudged Runt closer to her own eaglet, arranging them both beneath the arc of her wings. When the eaglet prodded the kitten with a sharp beak, the eagle snapped a warning call, so loud it echoed off the cliff and sent a flock of jays screaming from the trees below. The eaglet recoiled, startled, and then, astonishingly, settled beside Runt, both of them blinking in the fading light. Liam's mind spun. Was this mercy? Grief? Madness? The wild never gave easy answers. He tried to remember every detail, already knowing that no photograph could capture the full strangeness of what he was seeing. The line between predator and prey, etched in blood and instinct, seemed, just for a moment, to blur. But wonder quickly curdled to dread. As the afternoon waned, it became clear that the eagle, despite her protective stance, would not feed Runt. She offered morsels to her own chick, tearing meat with precise, practiced motions, but ignored the kitten entirely. Runt lifted its head weakly, tiny mouth opening in a silent plea, but there was nothing for him here. The eagle's mercy was not enough. Runt would not die from violence, but from neglect, starved in the shadow of a kindness that went only halfway. Liam felt the hopelessness coil inside him, cold and sharp. He scribbled in his notebook, hands shaking. Mercy is not the same as rescue. Kindness with no understanding. Is this how miracles die? His mind raced with impossible calculations. If he waited, he would watch Runt wither, slow and helpless. If he tried to climb, he risked his own life for a chance so slim it bordered on madness. The storm gathering over the western ridges seemed to echo his indecision, thunder rumbling low in the distance. From the nest above, a thin, pitiful mew drifted down, lost almost before it reached his ears. The wild does not offer happy endings, Liam reminded himself. It offers only what it must. But something in him rebelled at the thought of doing nothing, of letting this impossible twist of fate collapse under its own weight. Was it arrogance to imagine he could change the outcome? Or was it a kind of duty, to act, because he alone had witnessed the impossible? He lowered the binoculars and stared up at the nest, now a silhouette against the bruised sky. The bobcat mother was far away, nursing her own loss in the shadows below. The eagles guarded their home, obeying instincts older than memory. And Liam, trembling with awe and sorrow, understood at last. Sometimes nature breaks its own rules, and sometimes just watching is the cruelest act of all. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, not sure if it was rain or tears. Above, the eagle spread her wings, sheltering both her own chick and the orphaned kitten beneath her breast. But the law of the wild had not changed, and unless someone did the unthinkable, morning would bring only silence. The storm hesitated on the horizon, casting long shadows over the mountain's jagged teeth. Liam huddled beneath an outcrop, replaying the day's images on his battered camera. Each photo told a story, some sharp and clear, others blurred with motion or trembling hands. He scrolled back, looking for something he'd missed, some clue in the mess of heartbreak and instinct. One shot caught his eye. It was a photo from 2 days before, the nest barely visible through a scrim of rain. But this time, the lens had captured more than the living, the shape of a dead eaglet, limp and wrong among the sticks. Liam remembered the way its head lolled at a strange angle, and the ugly black swelling near the leg. He enlarged the image. There, tiny twin punctures, rimmed with purple. Rattlesnake bite. It had been no ordinary loss. Memory flashed. He'd seen a rattlesnake, fat and slow, coiled near the bobcat den. At the time, he'd marked it as a danger to the kittens, not the eagles. But now, in the isolation and exhaustion of the wild, the story began to thread itself together. The mother eagle had lost her chick to poison. In the language of grief and hunger, she had tried to fill the emptiness. When she saw the bobcat kitten exposed on the ground, threatened by the same snake, something in her broke. The rules of the wild bent, just a fraction, under the unbearable weight of loss. The kidnapper was not a monster, nor a villain. She was simply a mother whose world had come undone. Liam's heart ached unexpectedly for the eagle. He felt the line blur for a moment, between rescuer and thief, between mercy and desperation. It was all just survival, but survival colored by longing and pain. The wind picked up, carrying with it the metallic scent of rain and the distant crackle of thunder. The storm was coming, and with it, a new and very real danger. If he waited any longer, the slick face of the cliff would become a death sentence, not just for the kitten, but for anyone foolish enough to climb. As he packed his gear, Liam caught a movement above. The male eagle, larger and more imposing, was circling the nest. His screams split the air, high, furious, unnatural. The threat was obvious. Any attempt to approach the nest now would be met with talons and fury. Liam crouched low, heart pounding, brain tumbling through half-baked plans. He knew what a parent eagle could do, how a single blow could knock a grown man from the rocks, how the wild would erase any trace of his passing in a matter of days. Yet the alternative was unthinkable: to wait and watch and do nothing as the storm claimed the kitten. He weighed every option, logic fighting with hope. If he could distract the eagles just for a minute, maybe he could make it to the nest and back alive. But every second lost meant the weather would get worse, the climb more impossible. Liam's gaze drifted back to the marmot carcass he'd passed earlier that day, half buried in leaves near the trail. A sudden idea sparked. Marmots were irresistible to eagles, big, fatty, and rare in spring. If he could use the carcass as bait and add a sound lure, maybe, just maybe, the eagles would leave the nest long enough for him to make his move. He began to move, quick and methodical. Every sound from above made his shoulders tense, waiting for the next scream or the rush of wings. He retrieved the carcass, heavy and unpleasant, then rooted through his pack for the small, portable speaker he kept for emergency use. His fingers shook as he loaded up a file of distressed rabbit calls, a sound that would send any raptor in earshot into a frenzy. He glanced at the cliff, its edges gleaming slick with the first drops of rain. Then back at the sky, where the male eagle circled tighter, angrier. It has to be now, he thought, every instinct screaming against the gamble he was about to take. The world seemed to hold its breath. Liam laid out the trap, double-checked every detail, and steeled himself for the most dangerous climb of his life. Above, the storm churned and the eagles screamed. Below, a man weighed the cost of mercy against the laws of the wild. And somewhere in between, a single, trembling life waited for a miracle that had not yet come. Rain began to splatter the rocks, first as pinpricks, then as icy sheets. The world narrowed to slick stone and swirling wind, every sound muffled except the wild thump of Liam's heart. He moved quickly, fighting the urge to look up, afraid he'd see the eagles circling closer, or worse, catch the glint of a talon in the storm-dark sky. He dragged the marmot carcass into the open, hands numb and trembling. The stench was overwhelming, but he barely noticed. Every move had to count. He set the portable speaker in the crook of a boulder, pressing play. Immediately, the air filled with frantic rabbit distress calls, echoing off the cliff face, a siren song to any predator near enough to hear. For a moment, nothing happened. Liam crouched low, exposed and vulnerable, counting the beats of his own fear. Then, with a rush of air, the female eagle launched from the nest, massive wings beating the storm, her scream lost in the wind. The male dove beside her, drawn by the lure, both birds swooping and twisting over the carcass. Liam didn't wait to see if the ruse would last. He shouldered his pack, heart drumming like thunder, and ran for the cliff. He reached the base, hands already slick with rain, boots squelching in the mud. The climb was madness, a mosaic of mossy cracks, slippery holds, every step an act of faith. The mountain punished arrogance, and Liam knew it. One slip here, and the earth would take him back without a sound. The distress calls behind him rose to a fever pitch. He spared a glance over his shoulder. Both eagles were locked in a wild spiral, talons tearing at the marmot, eyes crazed by hunger and fury. He had to move fast. He found his first foothold, pulled up, testing every ledge with the weight of his body and his belief. Rain blurred his vision, streaked the stone, filled every gap with doubt. The air was sharp with the scent of wet feathers and coming lightning. His hands cramped around the rock, fingers numb, muscles burning. He moved by instinct, left hand, right foot. Don't think, don't look down. The cliff was alive, vibrating with the energy of the storm. Halfway up, the wind lashed him, nearly tearing him free. He pressed his chest to the rock, gasping for breath, clinging as the world tilted around him. His jacket snagged, tearing at the shoulder. He ignored it, blood seeping through fabric, mingling with the rain. He found a shallow ledge, forced himself to pause. His arms shook with exhaustion, but the image of the bobcat kitten, curled and dying in a nest of strangers, pushed him on. Just a little further. He pictured the eagles, one quick glance away from realizing their nest was vulnerable. His plan was a thin thread, straining with every heartbeat. He pulled himself higher, boots scraping, nails splitting on stone. At last, his fingers closed around the rim of the nest, slick, tangled, alive with feathers and the restless movement of the eagle chick. The nest was chaos. The eagle's chick hissed, backing away, eyes wide with terror. And there, barely breathing, was Runt. Wet, cold, a tiny miracle still holding on. Liam's heart nearly broke at the sight. The kitten's fur was plastered to its body, shivering uncontrollably, breath shallow and ragged. He worked fast, murmuring gentle nonsense, hands trembling as he slipped the kitten into a makeshift pouch, his jacket, torn from his own back, wrapped tight for warmth. For a split second, he locked eyes with the eagle chick. Predator and prey, orphan and survivor, both equally lost. The wind screamed louder than ever. A shadow fell across the nest. The eagles, realizing the trick, wheeled back, shrieking their outrage. Liam could feel the storm's fury gathering behind him as he slipped the pouch into his pack, cinching it tight against his chest. He scrambled over the rim, boots searching for purchase, every muscle burning. The first eagle struck, missing by inches. A rush of wind, a flash of talon. He slid, skidding down wet stone, hands torn raw, pain sharp as ice. Another blow grazed his pack. He threw himself into a controlled fall, trusting gravity more than skill, bouncing off a ledge, then tumbling into the wet ferns at the cliff's base. He lay there, gasping, rain on his face, the storm roaring its approval. In his arms, the kitten stirred, a soft, broken mew. He clutched the fragile bundle to his chest, feeling the wild, terrified heartbeat beneath his hands. Above, the eagles screamed, circling furiously, defeated, but not for long. But Liam was already running, the world blurring behind him. Every step a promise that sometimes the wild could be bent, not broken, by the smallest act of courage. Rain battered the forest as Liam stumbled through the trees, every muscle trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. Branches whipped his face, mud sucked at his boots. Still, he cradled the makeshift pouch to his chest, one hand cupped around the tiny bobcat's body, shielding it from the cold. He barely felt the scrapes on his arms or the throbbing ache in his shoulder. Every part of him was tuned to the desperate heartbeat fluttering against his palm. He found the clearing where the bobcat mother had last roamed, pacing circles into the earth. For a moment, Liam worried she'd vanished, that his frantic dash had been in vain. But then, a flicker of movement in the shadows, a pair of golden eyes, wild and wary, glinted through the rain-soaked brush. He set the pouch down in the grass and retreated a few steps, heart hammering. The bobcat mother slunk forward, suspicion etched into every sinew. She sniffed the bundle, ears pinned back, muscles coiled in tension. Then, with a low, guttural purr, she nudged the kitten free, licking its sodden fur with a hunger and gentleness that stopped Liam's breath. Runt's tiny mew rose up, a sound both pitiful and stubborn. The mother pressed her body close, wrapping the kitten in the safety of her warmth. For a long moment, they lay together in the rain, trembling, alive, and whole again. Liam watched in silence, awe and relief flooding through him. The reunion was messy, awkward, but no less extraordinary for its imperfection. Above, thunder rolled, but for the first time all day, the storm in Liam's chest began to subside. High on the cliff, the eagles wheeled, unsettled. Their cries cut through the downpour, sharp and angry. The mother eagle landed heavily on the rim of her nest, scanning for threats, feathers ruffled by the wind. Her surviving chick huddled close, peering out with frightened eyes. There was loss here too, a space where something should have been, a bond that could never be replaced. But there was resilience as well, woven into the very structure of the nest. The wild did not wait for grief to pass. It simply pressed forward, demanding life continue, no matter the wound. Liam tilted his face up, blinking away rain, feeling the pull of both joy and sorrow. The bobcat mother and her kitten below, the eagles and their chick above, two families, both scarred, both surviving in ways no field guide could ever predict. The line between villain and victim, thief and rescuer, had blurred so completely that only the forest itself could judge. He returned to his camp as darkness pressed close, every inch of him aching, hands bleeding, camera case bumping against his side. He unpacked, fingers stiff, and checked the images stored inside. Evidence that none of this had been a fever dream. Through each frame he saw again the moments of terror, tenderness, and wild, unpredictable grace. Liam sat by the low orange flicker of his camp stove, breath steaming in the damp air. He stared into the dark, replaying the day's events. He thought about the rules he'd broken, the silent contract of the observer, the promise never to interfere. Had he crossed a line or simply answered a call older than any man-made code? In the end, the question faded in the hush of the rain and the rhythm of the wild. He realized that what he'd witnessed would change him forever. Nature, he understood now, was not just brutal. It was mysterious, layered, capable of mercies and cruelties that defied all reason. He closed his eyes, letting the rain tap out its secret language on the tarp above. The bobcat family was whole again, if only for a night. The eagles had kept their nest, if only by a hair's breadth, and somewhere in the balance, a story had been born, one that would ripple outwards long after the storm had passed. As the forest fell silent and the world shrank to the circle of firelight, Liam felt both smaller and more connected than he'd ever been. He was no longer just a photographer, or even a witness. He was the keeper of a story that belonged truly to the wild. Sometimes, the wild reminds us just how thin the line is between instinct and compassion, between predator and protector. What I witnessed on that storm-racked ridge will stay with me for the rest of my life. A lesson in the mysterious, often heartbreaking logic of nature. A mother eagle, driven by grief, shelters a creature she should have destroyed. A man, sworn never to interfere, finds himself caught between the rules of the wild and the pull of mercy. And in the middle, a fragile life endures. Because just for a moment, the laws of survival gave way to something that looked a lot like hope. If this story makes you believe that nature still holds miracles, moments that defy reason and expectation, please let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next extraordinary tale from the wild. Every share and every comment helps keep these stories alive and reminds us all that wonder is never as far away as we think. Thank you for being a part of this journey. I hope you'll join me again as we look for the beauty, the heartbreak, and the hope that nature still has to offer.